Hi, welcome to the Kansas Municipal Utilities Legislative Update for Monday, April 27th. So this week we're going to be talking about wrapping up the 2020 legislative session, various executive orders, as well as the projected budget deficit for the state. Looking ahead, there are a couple of key dates I want to pull your attention to. The first is May 6th. That's the next day that the Legislative Coordinating Council is slated to meet in order to deliberate on a potential return date to conclude the 2020 legislative session. Another date is May 21st, and that is the slated date for lawmakers to return to Topeka to conclude the legislative session. And then also June 1st, which is the filing deadline for House and Senate members. We do have, it's an election year, and the entire House is up for election as well as the entire Senate. So 125 members in the House, 40 members of the Senate. So there will probably be a lot of deck chairs moving between the House and the Senate and some retirements yet to be announced. So things will certainly change as if we haven't experienced enough change as it is. So with that, what is the path going forward? So as we know, and we've talked about, the Kansas legislature adjourned pretty swiftly on March 19th as the COVID-19 pandemic was continuing to increase and worsen. Caseload counts were increasing as well. And lawmakers probably had 30 to 40 issues still outstanding to be deliberated. They really winnowed that down to the top 3 or 4 particular issues. So the first being an emergency powers declaration. The House needed to pass that resolution and then move it on over to the Senate. The House resolution allowed for that powers declaration to extend through the beginning of the next year, so 2021. When the Senate began deliberating it, they moved that date back to May 1st. So we'll talk about the implications of that date change. Lawmakers were also really focused on passing a budget in the event that they weren't going to return to the legislative session. They at least needed to have some sort of budget prepared and ready to go, which they did accomplish. And we'll talk more about that. The last particular issue that they passed was a 10-year transportation plan. So those are the three the three big action items that were accomplished prior to the end of the legislative session, the first portion of it. So the governor's emergency powers resolution, the House again allowed for that resolution to extend through January 1 of 2021. And then the Senate did alter that date to May 1st. And that has created a bit of a timing issue for the governor's stay-at-home order. So right now, if you have the powers resolution that ends on May 1st, and then the stay-at-home order ends on May 4th, what happens on May 2nd and 3rd? So there are a lot of legal teams that are exploring what that looks like. And the main reason why this is a real concern is because of the federal money that has been allocated to the state of Kansas from Congress. And that's about $1.25 million for disaster relief and other funding. And so there's a question as to whether or not the funding stream still comes if a new disaster is declared. So discussion on how to move forward for May 2nd and May 3rd literally is happening as we speak. I think some were hoping that the legislature would in fact return and just return very quickly to address that emergency powers declaration. But I think not speaking for anyone, just giving, the situation on the ground and then contemplating the fact that 65% of the Kansas legislature is considered high risk, of the members of the Kansas legislature are considered high risk, and that does not consider spouses or staff members or so on and so forth. I think there was some hesitancy in bringing folks back, especially could we adhere to social distancing guidelines? There were questions about that. Our Constitution requires final action votes to occur in Topeka, not necessarily in the Capitol, but at least final action votes have to occur in person in Topeka. And so there was discussion about, well, could we bring back just a simple majority of lawmakers, just 63 in the House and 21 in the Senate, and space them out accordingly, even in the galleries, and still adhere to social distancing guidelines. But I think there was maybe just a little bit logistically a little too challenging, and then also the continued health risks. So May 6th is the new date that the Legislative Coordinating Council will come together and deliberate whether or not the legislature will return and And if so, what does that look like and who comes back? The legislature is slated to adjourn officially on May 21st for the 2020 legislative session. So, hopefully we'll know more on May 6th what that might even look like. So, the next particular issue is the budget. And one of the last things that lawmakers did before they adjourned was they passed the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which begins July 1. And they left an ending balance of around $900 million for that fiscal year. And then starting fiscal year 2022, it had $750 million ending balance, roughly. COVID-19 has significantly altered what the state's budget is going to look like for the foreseeable future. And so in this coming fiscal year, the ending balance was going from 900 to around 250. And then for the next fiscal year, significant damage was done. And the ending balance was going from $750 million all the way to a negative $600+ million deficit. So Governor Kelly has already slotted her agencies and tasked her agencies with identifying various steps and measures to reduce expenditures. The House Appropriations Committee met last week, as did the Senate Ways and Means Committee. There was conversation directing K-12 education, which is the largest line item in the state's budget, to look for ways to save, cuts, furloughs, spending cuts, and reductions. Same with higher education as well. So I think a lot of things are on the table for discussion at this particular time. If the legislature returns, to be sure, addressing the budget is going to be the top shelf priority. And, we're not sure what other issues will be worked on, but I would suspect number one and the bulk of the focus will be on the budget issue. Governor Kelly has talked that sometime midweek this week, we will see some guidelines from her administration on the phased reopening of the state and businesses. So she did anticipate that a lot of that control will go back to the local units of government to make those decisions, and that they will be issuing guidances and guidelines based on science and data and metrics. And that, however, if the situation worsens or appears to be turning for the worse, that they would reserve the right to reassume control over the state's response. So one issue that we are talking closely with, certainly we're in regular communication with the governor's office and various other state agency heads, but one issue in particular relates to utility shutoffs for our electric, natural gas, water, and wastewater customers. And the Kansas Corporation Commission has extended that order through May 15th for the investor-owned utilities. We are working on a policy guidance document for our municipal utilities on what that might look like. We know that several of the communities have already extended out through the middle of May or through the end of May, that disconnect shut-off policy. So we continue to watch any movement that comes out of the governor's office as it relates to any additional executive orders. And I think that is largely what we just wanted to focus on this particular legislative update. As you always know, Colin and Brad and and myself, the entire KMU team, we're all here to help in any way. Hopefully, if you have any questions, reach out to us at any time. Visit the KMU website. There's a great deal of information specifically related to COVID-19 on the website as it relates to utility matters. So we appreciate you taking the time. Please stay healthy. Please stay safe and give us a call at any time if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.